All right, now, in the first half hour, Noreen talked about how they did nothing in those first couple days. Tell us what you think was how this operated. How, the actions of the police chief were not the actions of a man who wanted to protect the community, but someone who was paid off, perhaps. How does this work? How did this police chief basically, how was he able to get this whole force to stand down when there was evidence showing that Johnny had been kidnapped?
Well, that's not hard to figure out. What usually happens there, and it doesn't generally involve payoffs, but some higher authority comes in and tells them, listen, this is a far bigger case. We're going to take this over, and we want you guys to stay out of it. And being a good doobie, following orders, the guy backs down. Although we are seeing that at the time, there was further involvement with the police in this underground. And I believe that's going on to this day. And it definitely dovetails into the Omaha, Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, and other parts of the country where this particular group has been operating for many, many years. In fact, there was an investigation done by one of the federal agencies from 1982 to 89 with 20 men assigned to it. And after the investigation, I personally interviewed this guy just a number of years ago who verified that 834 children were taken at that time, and nothing's ever been done.
Now, Jim, you've said in the past that this is the biggest terrorist threat that our country faces, that this problem has escalated since Johnny's kidnapping, that Johnny's case is a watershed case in a sense for people to really understand how these pedophile rings operate and how high up they really go. And you also said that Noreen has been probably the only mother that has stood up to these people and tried to get to the truth about their sons. Now, basically, our hope, you said, is for parents of other children who've been taken to all band together, that people who want to protect their children who haven't been taken yet to band together, and this is our only hope. And I wanted to get Noreen's comments about this and about what you've seen behind the scenes and why parents have been so silent, Noreen, and why you haven't. What is the difference between you and them?
I think the basic difference is fear. Many of them are terribly afraid to cross the line and question authority. And that becomes another whole issue. When it comes to something like that, I am no respecter of titles. If someone is hurting a child, if someone is covering up for the fact that a crime was committed, then I play on through. I don't take no for an answer. And I also was in a position where I did not have other small children at home. I was free to travel, free to go out on all the speaking engagements, rally people, do what I had to do to investigate. If I would have had other small children at home, it would have been much more difficult to do the traveling. But I do think in talking to other parents who have not stepped forward, like right here in Des Moines, there was 2 other kidnappings, I would have welcomed the help from the other families to band together to demand answers. But I think they were just overwhelmed by the police, and they were told to shut up, and they did.
Now, Jim, you've seen this up close and personal with family members because you've investigated these cases from New York and from the East Coast to the West Coast. What's your take on this, and how can we get to the bottom? And that really means, how do we get to the top of who's still orchestrating these cases? What do we do?
Well, again, it goes back to information and the experience I got over the years of investigating these cases. At the time I was with the New York City Police Department, I traveled all over the United States to find out what was happening. And through this, I got to actually speak and work with people who were directly involved in this whole operation. And at one point, we had even worked with a group called the Policy Science Corporation, which was headed by a guy named Laswell, Harold Laswell. And I remember at one time asking him, I says, I'm doing all this, I'm trying to get something done, but it's you hit the stone wall. And he's the one that told me, and like I said, these are things based on talking to a lot of people, and he's the one that told me you have to get the mothers to stand up and make the men and fathers do what they should do. And after all these years, and again, when I met Noreen, it was really refreshing that there was one mother who would stand up. And I do agree that many of them are threatened or told, and they believe in the system that the cops will do their job. But here's what happens. They're scared to say anything because they've been, you don't want to make the police mad, otherwise they're not going to investigate. Well, that's the greatest cover-up in the world. How can you make somebody mad that's not doing anything in the first place? And this is what the police use as an excuse not to work on this. But there's one other thing that comes into this is any police officer, federal agent, may it be the FBI, Customs, that works these types of cases, their careers are over. So you need, and there's plenty of cops out there that would do the right job. In fact, I've spoken to somebody just lately, and he told me it hasn't changed. And he says, if I take this type of cases, my career is over. So here's another point, that we need the people to back the police that want to do their job. That detective I interviewed in Des Moines, Iowa, that has Johnny's case now, there'd be nothing more than, he'd like nothing better than to open this case up, but he can't. So this is where the problem comes in, and Noreen knows this better than anybody. She's been right there. The only thing is she hasn't backed down.
Exactly, and to talk about your point, Jim, just for a second, that there are good policemen out there, and there's even a former policeman that listens to my show from Portland that wants to get in touch with you guys. He worked on cases like this in Portland, Oregon. He's now retired, and he wants to lend assistance. And I will get there. Off the air, I will get him in touch with you, Jim, so you guys can talk. So there are people that want to stop this problem because, look, Johnny's been gone for I don't know how many years now. He's in his late 30s. I want to get to this aspect of the story. Never during this time did they ever really investigate this case and bring him home. And still to this day, Noreen, is Johnny still under their control? And talk about this last visit, because some people get confused. How could he come home and then leave again? What's going on? How did this occur? What is your son like now?
What we have learned and what we've been told by witnesses that knew Johnny and were kept with him during their captivity. One in particular told us that he and Johnny had run away. They stole a car to get away. And they went to this young man's father's home. I was able to make contact because the father called me. Johnny stayed there for a few days. He did not realize that it was my son at the time because he was going by another name. Mm-hmm. And his son just told him it was a kid that he met along the way. This boy's father had no idea it was a kidnapped child. They stayed at this boy's house for a few days. Then Johnny left, and this man told me that he heard him say that he was going to try to find a place to live on an Indian reservation. Mm-hmm. A short time after that, America's Most Wanted did our story. When the man saw Johnny's picture, he realized it was the same boy. And that's when he got in touch with me. And he was a well-respected CPA in Wisconsin. But his son was also a victim of this network, and that's how his son met my son.
How old
Johnny
was Johnny
then went to live on an Indian reservation as far as we knew. But they were free to a certain extent from the group that took them, probably because they were starting to outlive their usefulness. They weren't cute little boys anymore that might be desired by a pedophile. They had reached another stage of development.
Mm-hmm. Okay.